All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Neverlag Gaming Podcast, July about June. We are finally here, as foretold in June about May. Back here.
The
It sounds
prophecy
so
in June about
ridiculous
May
every
said
time.
that we'd be back in July about June
July
to talk
about
about
June.
June. I don't know. Yeah.
Technology tried to hold us back, and we persevered. So here we are. You're welcome. And we're going to talk about June. Right, trying to get my months straight. So,
You're
yeah,
making it difficult, but I'm pretty sure we're here to talk about the month of June.
time makes it difficult. To be honest, it's really not my
True.
fault.
That's true.
So, as always, I am one of your hosts, Levi, joined by the man who fell in the pit, Zach, on the other side. And yeah, we're gonna, as usual, get into June, talk about this and that and the other thing, and etc. Games we've played, maybe some other stuff. I think. Well, we'll see. We're going to feel this out, but I think we'll probably talk about some demos that I played during Steam Next Fest, which was that early June? I think that was early June.
Somewhere in there. Yeah.
I have not discussed this with you, but I don't think we need an extra episode for that, unless you have like 17 games that you played in June.
No, I only played 2, so we could. I think this is probably a good
Me
forum
too.
to go through that.
Okay,
Well, cool, perfect.
right on.
Let's do it.
Well, let's see here. Let's get into it with. Let's do the demos last. Let's talk about some games. I mean, should we start with Elden Ring or should we start with other stuff? That's the question.
Elden Ring's what I've played most recently. How many games did you play?
Just 2.
Just 2.
Just
what
2
was the other one? Was Stellar Blade the other one?
No, Stellar Blade's the other one, right?
That's my.
Let's start there. Let's start there,
Yeah.
because I do want to know, ye who have beaten the Stellar Blade. On the other side here, am I halfway through it? It's been a while. I have dropped off. I will get back to it. Last we spoke in June about May, I was mid. I was trudging through the wannabe open world sections of the game.
Yeah.
And struggling mightily. And I did get past that specific first desert. There's 2 deserts in this game. The second desert I was enjoying more, to be honest, which it's still a little uninspired, but I was enjoying it more. So yeah, just really briefly, I have gotten farther since we spoke in June about May. I have since discovered fishing, which is very fine also. And I don't know if I'm trying to think if I fought any like major bosses, which I think really is this game's shining, like its best feature. So absolutely. I need to progress and fight some more bosses. I think I've stagnated a bit too much trudging around in the minutia, the side quests, the pointless stuff. I need to just get through the bosses, and that way I finish the game and not just stop. So anyways, having finished it, where do you fall on the Neverlag scale that we've never invented? How do you feel about the game?
On this scale we've never discussed, I'm coming in at a solid
37.
37 out of 49. No, this was good. On a 10-point scale, I don't know. I haven't really thought too much on it. It's probably somewhere in the 8 ballpark. It's good though. The bosses are the shining feature. And I think it's a really solid game. If you like awesome boss fights, if you like Souls combat and mixed with like kind of the action, what's the term? Kind of like the Bayonetta action style
just
combat.
Action RPGs. I mean,
action RPG mixed with like some Souls like elements. Then I think this is worth finishing. I kind of had this similar journey as you. So when I first started this game, like the intro to it, I think is really strong. You fight some cool bosses within the first 30 minutes to an hour. I think the opening couple areas are pretty linear, and it feels kind of like a Souls experience in that way, where you're guided pretty well. You unlock doors and you find your way to a boss fight, and it's fun. And then I kind of got to the more middle section of the game, and there's a couple open areas, and especially that first open area. It's like this big wasteland area, and the design of that wasteland is really frustrating, and it's very like visually tiring. It's just like a deserty wasteland with not a lot of cool elements to it, and there's not a lot of stuff that's really fun to do. The enemies are just kind of scattered. you know, all over the place without any rhyme or reason. It doesn't have the intentionality of like a nice linear experience like some of the earlier levels did. And I also got wrapped up in the, trying to do the platinum and get all the side quests and do all the stuff. And some of those things were okay, and some of them were
Yeah,
pretty
that's my
tiring.
downfall a little bit too. Yeah.
And I just decided, because I think I got distracted with Animal Well for like 2 weeks and just beat
Yeah.
that, and that was amazing. But um, then I went back to it, and I was struggling to get back into it, and I decided, you know what, I'm gonna not worry about the platinum. I'm gonna skip a bunch of the side stuff and just move forward with main stuff, and that made a world of difference because I got back to the main bosses, the main plot, and I thought it got really interesting again. And I think the first like quarter or third of the game and the last like third or quarter of the game are the strongest. And so it's worth finishing. If you've started it and you liked it and you're getting a little burned out, just push through with the main stuff, because the ending of this I thought was really cool. There's some really neat locations, really cool set pieces and like skyboxes that you go through, and there's a really cool like kind of gauntlet of bosses throughout that last third or quarter of the game that I thought were really fun. They were pretty challenging. There's a couple of really memorable boss fights from that last section of the game that I would even go back and play again. Like one or two in particular, I kind of want to do again just because they were really
Yeah.
challenging. They
They,
forced you to learn their move set. Um, what were we going to say?
I was just gonna say they have a boss rush or
They do. Yeah,
boss rush in this, right?
I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they
Can you
do,
go back
which
and
is cool.
challenge individual bosses, or is it like a
I,
series? Have you
yeah, I
looked
haven't
at it at
tried it
all?
yet, so I don't know if they give you the option to just pick a boss or if you have to do the full gauntlet. But I'm pretty sure they at
That's
least
cool.
have the mode, which I might do at some point, because you skip all the like the bosses were the most fun part, and there's maybe a
Hmm.
few bosses here and there that were just kind of whatever. But um, yeah, the boss fights are what shines in this. And dude, the ending sequences were really fun. Um, the story is kind of weird and kind of in some ways very generic, in some ways like very like uh I don't know, Japanese RPG. Like it gets a bit convoluted and confusing.
Yeah.
um but it was cool. I liked what the narrative did. The ending was interesting. um Definitely they left themselves room for a sequel, which I would like, and I think that's a good way to recommend this game too, is that like I actively look forward to a sequel, and hopefully they will release it. I think this did fairly
Let's see
well,
if we get one.
and if they put it out, I'll play it, because this was fun. The bosses were cool. A lot of the areas were cool. It was like a bit of a mixed bag, but I would say very very much skewing positive. So yeah, dude, the ending sequence is so
There you
cool.
go.
I
Okay,
had a
well
lot of fun
that's
with it.
that's
Glad I
I
finished
mean
it.
that's good to know.
Yeah,
That's totally where I'm at right now, is that I'm not in the middle of it. I would have to kind of restart. Getting the train back on the tracks is always kind of the hardest part when you step off of a game. And I fortunately I'll take a look at it. The platinum, it doesn't look like the hardest thing, but it is a bit tedious, but I think I've done most of the groundwork honestly at this point,
yeah.
which to my detriment, I think it has really slogged me down and just kind of made me start disliking the game, where I would be a lot better if I just played through and fought the bosses. There's not like, I don't even think in this game there's any like optional bosses really that you can miss, are there?
I don't know for
I'm trying to
sure.
think. Playing through everything feels pretty linear as far as that's concerned. I
It's
mean, there's
pretty
like mini
linear.
bosses in open areas, but not like true bosses, I don't think.
I don't think so, but I don't know that for
So
sure. Yeah,
I don't think that's a concern. I need to get back in. It's an open folder in my brain. I need to get back and finish the game. Especially, I mean, to hear you say that the ending sequence and boss fights are that cool, set piece wise and everything.
yeah.
I think
There's
that's well worth finishing, because I am
cool
I
stuff.
am enjoying the combat, and I really enjoy the enemy design, and I have really enjoyed the boss fights. I just have spent too much time in between boss fights at this point, and it's starting to wear me thin a little bit.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's good, and there's a few really challenging ones. I don't think it's on the level of difficulty of like Dark Souls 3 or like Bloodborne DLC in particular. But it's challenging. There's a few bosses that I had to, I spent an hour or two fighting. There's one boss in that ending
oh
sequence that
really? Wow.
probably took me 3 hours to. And now I'm not very good at these games, so like for me, 3 hours is probably for you like 30 minutes to an hour. But um, still, like there's a couple of boss fights that took a lot. They had like a good set of moves, like a couple phases or parts that you had to adjust to like new move sets and all of that. So it's fun. You know, I think there's a couple boss fights that maybe aren't don't live up to quite what you'd want them to be, but there's some that do. So it's good. Like moderate your expectations a little. This isn't, you know, this isn't a From Software game, but it's pretty good and it's cool. I'm excited to hear your thoughts
No,
when you get there.
I have pretty set expectations at this point. I've played the game, I know what it is. I feel like it's
Yeah,
a 6 out of 10 everywhere else, and it's an 8 to sometimes 9 out of 10 with boss
yeah,
fights. Is
I
kind of
think
how it
that's
feels.
fair.
So
Yeah,
I will I'll get back to it. I got to get back to it soon, because honestly, the summer has been packed with. I feel like it may seem a little low key, not a ton of like major releases for the summer, but for me personally, there have been a lot of indie double A games that have and will be releasing in July and August. Not to mention Black Myth Wukong comes out in August. Like there's just a lot that I actually want to play this summer that I of course inevitably will not get to most of it, but it's just like,
yep,
especially before um I don't know, I just got to get back to it as soon as I can before it becomes something in the distant past that I
yeah.
that
Well,
I
that's
never
why
get back to, you know.
I had a similar thought because I like paused in the middle of it and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to finish this. And I don't like, I know you like to get platinums more than I do, but for me, I was like, I'm not even going to worry about that and just have fun, finish the
No,
game.
yeah.
Uh, and I'm glad I did. And I
That's
don't
the
feel like,
priority for
you
sure.
know, I don't feel like I need, and that allowed me to start getting to other things I wanted to do, like replaying Elden Ring. We'll get to
Right? Yeah, replaying, that's true. That is totally true. Yeah, I'm trying to do I do want to make a better, you know, it's all entertainment at the end of the day, and it's our leisure time, but like I do want to do a better job of finishing games
yeah.
and get I guess the better term would be, I do finish a lot of games, getting through games quicker. I
Hmm.
have noticed this, and we'll talk, maybe I'll discuss this a little bit when we talk about Erdtree. I have further and further descended into some very bad tendencies playing games where I am incredibly methodical and like check every square inch of everything.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't, like, as an example, in something like Elden Ring, there's a main path up to a castle. I cannot just run up the main path to the
No,
castle. I
I
will check
same.
every square inch of every branching path before I get there. And that is good. There's often a lot of things you can find, but it's also a very tiring way to play a game, and I have to find a balance because it's
Hmm.
something I enjoy. I like knowing I've checked everything, but it
Yeah.
also is very taxing, tedious, time consuming, and it's just, I don't know. It's hard to find a balance between a personality that enjoys that, but also this should be more
Yeah.
relaxing, adventurous exploration, not like checking every box mentally in your mind as you play.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I like doing that too.
anyways,
And that gets challenging because it's like, I want to play this game and I have 20 other games to play this year on my short list. But if I check
yeah,
every cave and every branching path, this game's going to take me 80 hours or 100 hours or, you
exactly.
know, in the case of Elden Ring, 200 hours. And it's like, there's just so much to get to. Like, is that the most
Yeah,
efficient use of, I don't know. It's hard to
that's
figure
kind
out.
of what I'm staring at right now. Is I've been thinking a lot about that, and I'm just like, okay, I could continue playing things the way I do, and I'll get through 10 games in the back half of 2024, or I could just more more free spiritedly play through games and not care if I'm missing some side content or whatever, and
Just become
play
more
20,
chill.
double it,
Yeah.
become more,
Yeah.
just change my entire
Let
personality.
things go,
So
man. Let things go.
I don't
No,
know, we'll
I'm
start,
with you.
but my point is we'll start with Stellar Blade. I'll get back in and I'll just mainline it, and I won't look at
Mainline
anything
it.
else.
I've actually had a similar fight, and
Scout's honor.
my what I've landed on is that for certain games, I'm going to explore every inch, like Breath of the Wild, Elden Ring, things where I'm like, I know this is one of my favorite games ever, and I want to explore everything. Games like Stellar Blade that I love, and but I can feel like a lot of aspects of the world and exploration are a 6 out of
That's a good
10.
point.
I forced
That's a
myself,
good
like with
point.
Stellar Blade, because I was doing the same thing and it was driving me insane. I was like, this game isn't worth my time for those areas. And I'm glad I got, because the stuff at the end was so worth it. I loved it. I feel like I have a very cohesive memory and imprint of Stellar Blade in my mind. And I feel good moving on. Whereas with Elden Ring, I just have so much fun in it. I'm like, I'm
Right.
happy to spend an extra 50
No,
hours.
that's a good point. That's a good point. Not everything is created equal, and you
Yeah.
balance it that way. That is a good thing to keep in mind because something like Elden Ring, where it's it's from software, the goats
Right.
doing what they do. You want to
Yeah.
savor it, but then something like a Stellar Blade, or we'll get to this, but upcoming, there's one I've had my eye on called Flintlock: The Siege of Dawn. That one looks
Yeah.
really interesting to me. I'm intrigued to play it, but I can kind of tell like, okay, this is probably a double A experience. This is one where you just have to ask yourself, would you rather
Yeah.
methodically spend a bunch of time in this game and get halfway through it and decide you're done? Or would you rather mainline it, finish it, experience the final boss or whatever, and know you missed some side stuff? And the answer is B. Like,
Yeah.
it's way better to finish a game and miss some side stuff than to
Right.
100% half of a game.
I'm
So,
totally with you. And I feel like you can usually sense that by about 30% of the game. Sometimes sooner, sometimes a little
yeah, I
later,
think
but
so.
that's kind of how I felt Stellar Blade is. I got far enough in, I was like, I know what this is and I know what I want out of it. And Flintlock probably will be similar. Who knows? Maybe you'll start it and you're like, this is great. I want to explore everything,
Yeah.
but probably not.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Oh,
So yeah,
anyways,
Stellar Blade's good.
a long aside, but yeah, it's something to think about. But with Stellar Blade, I'm definitely gonna
Yeah.
cut a lot of the. I mean, I did you fish a bunch in Stellar Blade?
I fished enough to be like, what am I doing? I was trying to get the fishing trophy. And so
What am I doing with my life?
I did a fair amount of fishing, and it was like for fishing mini
It's
games
pretty
are
boring fishing, I feel like.
it was okay. There was a couple of like aspects to it that made it was engaging a little. Like it wasn't just like sit and wait and then press a button. It's like there's a couple of phases to it, and you had to do a couple of different
Yeah.
mechanical things. But I wouldn't call it enjoyable either.
Yeah, I've mostly found
Um,
it is engaging, but I found it annoying. Whereas a lot of
yeah,
mini games that I've liked in games, they're not challenging, but they're simplistic and
yeah,
feel good for some reason. You're just like, "Ooh, that was fun to fish."
right.
This didn't give that to me. It was like, this is kind of hard and a little annoying with the
Totally. And
controller.
like
I
there's
don't
this
know.
one, I was trying to get this one fish that could only be found in this one spot, and it took me forever to find the right little body of water that was kind of buried in, a level. And then I finally get there, and it's like you had to have a specific type of bait, and I didn't realize that till I got there. And so then I had to travel all the way back
Oh
to the
my
desert
gosh.
to the vendor who has it, and it's like I had to run to him and get the bait, and I get back and I got like 10 of this bait. I was like, that'll be enough. Like this bait attracts that type of fish. And then I did it. I used all 10 of them and it didn't get it a single time. I was like the RNG was just terrible. So I had to go back, and then I was out of the currency to buy the bait. So I had to do a bunch of other stuff to get more currency. And I got like 20, and I did like 19 of them, still didn't get the fish. And then finally on the 20th one, I was like, if I don't get it, I'm going to like kill myself. Um, and I got the thing,
So
but
here's
it
the
was short.
question:
Yeah.
did you get the platinum or no?
No, no.
You
Shortly
did give
after
up.
that, it like moved on to the next phase, and you had to do more annoying stuff. And I was like, that was one of those moments where I was like, do I really care? But like,
This
am
is
I gonna
wasting a
feel?
life.
Yeah, I was like, am I getting anything out of this? Like, I'm not gonna care that
Was
much
it
about
more
the platinum.
fishing or was it a different trophy?
This one was there was a couple more things to do with the fishing itself, but there are other
Dang.
trophies I didn't
Okay.
get. Yeah,
I thought, man, that what that sucks. I'm gonna have a hard time mentally letting go because I've done so much pointless groundwork already. I thought I was
totally.
pretty close, but
I
if the
I don't think
fishing is that annoying, I may just bail on the platinum.
it might just be an RNG thing. I don't know. Like I don't think it's the
I'll
hardest
watch a
platinum
video,
ever.
make a decision.
Yeah. I don't think it's the hardest platinum ever either. It's just I realized like I also have kids. So it's like my time is constrained a lot for that. And I was like, do I want to spend my time trying to chase this platinum like in my off hours, or do I want to get into Elden Ring so I could play Shadow of the Erdtree and get ready and then beat that in a timely manner for Black Myth Wukong or whatever. So
Yeah.
that's what I landed on.
Okay. Well, real quick before we get into Erdtree, my other game that I've been playing is just my continuation from last month, but I have continued to play it. It's Wuthering Waves,
Oh,
which
that's right.
we
Wuthering
affectionately call it
Waves.
Woo-wah.
Woo-wah. I got a
Woo-wah,
Wuther.
which is way more fun to say.
I remember we looked it up, and
Um,
wuthering is indeed a word, which is cool. But it's also like you can tell there's like Japanese where they looked it up and they're like, "Hey, this is an English word," and it's like this is not an English word anyone knows. Like,
we
this
did
is
look it up. Wuthering
I
is a
did.
word
Yeah, wuthering is a real word, but it's like one of those words where it's like you looked at a thesaurus, and
of
so
weather
of weather.
characterized by
Yeah,
strong winds.
yeah. So it works.
Interesting.
It just
So like
sounds
big
silly.
waves because of weather.
Yeah.
I don't know. Okay,
I
all
don't know
right. Anyways,
the verb or the tense makes sense still, but wuthering is a word. So
Wuthered Waves.
yeah. Which makes sense because Wuthering
Um,
Heights. Wuthering Heights is like a famous classic novel. So
I
anyway,
thought it was Withering Heights. It's Wuthering.
it's Wuthering. Yeah, pretty sure.
Well, that would have. I
Now I gotta
okay.
check that.
Could have known that forever ago.
Yeah, it's Wuthering
Never
Heights,
heard
and
of.
I think for
Okay,
that
never
reason,
heard
it's
of.
like Windy Heights. So
Okay, Wuthering
they got
Heights.
it right.
Windy
But
Heights.
it's funny. You can just tell it's like they found that word and we're like, this is an English word and it means what we think we need it to mean. And then every English anybody who's like speaks English would be like, what is it? What does that mean?
I
It's like an
guess it's such a
archaic.
bad name. No one wants to say it, but at least it can be broken down to woo wah, and that is what it's been. It's worked out good because it's a good. It feels the mobile, almost the mobile game itch, which it is a mobile game, kind of like Genshin. But I don't like mobile games. I don't like playing games on my
Yeah,
phone. They're usually a
yeah,
little
same.
dinkier, which granted this can be played on your phone, but it's not a great experience. This
Yeah, I
still
hate using touch
feels
screens to play games.
yeah, this still feels great with a controller. It looks great on PC. The art style is really good. The character design, everything is really cool. They just I guess as I continue to talk about it, they just came out with their first patch since 1.0. They went into 1.1. Don't remember what it's called, but it introduced an entire new island part of the map that is basically a snowy, but like with red rocks everywhere, very red with snow. It's kind of cool. It's visually
That's
distinct from a lot
interesting.
of
Yeah.
things. Giant, giant dragon head mountain looking thing. It's just very visually cool. Um, so it's been a lot of fun. It's just a nice. I probably play it for unless there's something specific, new content I'm working on or whatever. I usually jump in for 15 to 30 minutes
Yeah.
throughout the day while I'm working on the computer or whatever. Do some daily stuff, run around and explore a little bit. It's very much. I mean, these games are literally creating a live service gotcha system based off of Breath of the Wild. You run around, you explore, you open chests, you do puzzles. Like if you just want something that kind of feels like you're playing Breath of the Wild, but is something to do every day, and it's kind of what it amounts to, and it works for
Mm-hmm.
me. So I've been playing. I've been enjoying it. What's funny is when I first booted it up last month in June, no, in May, I guess, because we talked about it in June about May. You're right. This is confusing. Um, I spent like 5 minutes in it, and I was like, "No, nah, I'm not doing this. I'm not learning another gacha game. Like, I can't be bothered." But if you recall, the one feature that sold me is that you can skip story content, which I kid you not is the best feature ever invented. And if Genshin could simply learn from that, it would be far more tolerable. Because I swear to you, let's say I spent 100 hours playing Genshin. 50 hours of that must have been mashing the A or X button, just trying to get through dialogue. Literally half of it, because I
Does
don't
that
know
speed up
who.
dialogue in Genshin at least? Like if you hit
Yeah,
X,
it does,
kind
but
of.
like not enough. But not
Yeah, yeah.
enough. You can do autoplay where they'll finish a sentence in auto and go on to the next one, but that's still real time. If you mash A, basically it's this weird system where they won't let you skip until they get like
Halfway
60% of the
through
way
or
through the
yeah.
dialogue. I don't know
I feel like I've
why.
had that in I've experienced that in other games too, where it's like it doesn't let you skip it
Oh,
until
it's
they've said most of
so
it.
it's
It's
like
like
if I
what's
want to
even the
skip, I want
point?
to skip. Like why do I need to wait
Yeah,
till 60%? I
totally.
don't know if it's a loading thing. It's horrible, and it feels like so much wasted time because I don't know who's working over at Hoyoverse or whatever that has this much to say, but every freaking side quest has like chapters worth of dialogue, and
And
you just have to
they
sit
want you to
there,
experience it.
and they want you to experience how amazing this dialogue is. It's
Mm,
brutal, and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. And then first patch they did for Wuwa, they were like, you can skip pretty much everything, and I
yeah,
have skipped everything. I don't watch anything, I don't listen to anything. I explore, get some new characters, build new characters. The combat pretty fun. It's pretty cool. It's very action based. I mean, I would say it's leaning into a Stellar Blade, Devil May Cry. It's very actiony, uh, very a lot of interaction. Like you can parry enemies, you can perfect dodge. You're still changing characters, which is typical in these games, but they've managed to make it a little bit more. like you're interacting with the enemies, whereas Genshin kind of feels like you just create this team and then you overwhelm enemies with what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't feel like you're really reacting to anything the enemy is doing, basically. So
Gotcha.
I think combat is a bit better. And yeah, I don't have too much more to say on it. I've been enjoying it. I think it's really well made. I think it's good that there's competition for Hoyoverse, who now have three gotcha games, like mainstream gotcha games out there, with Zenless Zone Zero just launching. So competition is definitely good, and I think
Yeah.
Wuthering Waves has the quality bar to compete, where a lot of things like that is what Genshin has. If you've
Yeah.
never played it, if it's not your style, fine, but it does have a pretty high quality bar when it comes to animations, art style, just all of this stuff feels very premium. And you get into some of the competitors that have come before, and they feel very, very discount
Like dollar
budget,
store. Yeah.
mobile,
Yeah.
dollar store versions. And this Wuthering Waves feels like a competent and polished competitor, which is nice. And there's a lot of things it's doing differently, even art style. I like the art style is a little less um, round and cutesy, and a little more edgy and anime. I don't mean edgy, and I mean just more like angular, and there's more detail,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
So that's been decent. I've been enjoying it. It's a nice little game. I will say, with the release of what's that new game that just came out? The first Descendants. Um, I think that's it, right? Have you heard about that?
I
It's
don't.
a new third person
I think
shooter,
I've vaguely
free to
heard of
play.
it. I don't know much about it though.
So I haven't done a ton of research into this, which means I shouldn't say anything. But here we go. From what I've heard, that game sounds like a gotcha third
Interesting.
person looter shooter. And I was thinking this as these become more popular. You've got Genshin, and then that moved into Tower of Fantasy and um, Star Rail and Zenless Zone Zero and Wuthering Waves, and there's more. I don't, there's a bunch of them. They're starting to come out more. I was like, it's only a matter of time until this. You know how World of Warcraft feels like an antiquated idea concept at this point?
Mm-hmm.
Like no
Yeah.
one's going to make a new World of Warcraft, unfortunately. I think we're headed that way for Destiny. Like Destiny was the modern World of Warcraft for the last decade or so. And I think in the next decade, it's going to be gacha. It's going to infiltrate everything
Oh,
live
I don't like
service
hearing
and
that.
these looter shooters. Because, and I could be wrong, but what I've heard is that this the first
I
Descendant
think you're
has
right.
characters, and you can only pick one at the start, one of three, and then others can be unlocked later through like extensive gameplay. And then other ones are, and now I don't know if it's an actual like wishing or loot box system, that I don't know, but I do know that it's very character based, and they're going to release new characters that have different fighting styles or different strengths, probably power creep. And I just am like, oh shoot, I think that's where we're headed. I think
Yeah.
gotcha games are going to infiltrate more mainstream genres of video games. So
Well, it makes sense. I mean, a game like WoW is such a
they're coming
commitment,
for
and
you.
again, you pay for the base game and then you pay a monthly fee, and now you got gotcha games where it's like you don't have to pay those things. You pay in other ways, obviously, but like I think
Yeah,
in the world we
through the
live
bung
in,
hole.
even if you had a developer who is willing to take on the cost to construct a game like WoW, and like with that type of like pricing structure and whatever, and they managed to make a really good compelling game, I think they would still greatly struggle to build the right type of player base with that structure, just based on, well, it's kind of like how Netflix has sort of messed up theater experiences and has messed up like the longer run TV series, and now we get all these limited series. Like there's benefits, but I think there are some real downsides, and I feel like that with like, season passes and gotcha style stuff. Like I get it, I get why it draws a crowd for this stuff, but it part of me hates hearing that. And I don't know, maybe someone will
Yeah.
manage to take a system like that and do something special with it. I'm not saying that's impossible. It's so easy to abuse those and
Well, I
make
think they
them
already have.
imbalanced.
I would argue they already have. I think Wuthering Waves, Genshin, I think they have special elements to them that unfortunately are held within a gacha system. And I think that's, I mean, what was that? There was a Dark Souls, a Souls like game announced at PlayStation State of Play that was said to be free to play. And we both were like, how is that possible?
Oh
because it looked
yeah,
really high quality. I don't remember what it was
it looked
called,
really cool. It was like
but
the
it's like, is this the
34
first gotcha
Expedition
Souls game?
34 or something.
No, that was the turn-based one, I think.
That was a turn-based one. There was another one. But yeah,
Yeah, I
it
don't
was one of
remember.
those. It looked really cool. I'm intrigued by it, but
And it's
I'm
just
also
like it's a
worried.
matter of time until there's a Souls-like game that releases where it's like, oh, I'm the brand new
Yeah.
monk or paladin's coming out this month. I hope I can get it, like I don't
Yeah.
know. I feel like we're headed toward that because I think people are sick of like old style loot boxes that obviously burnt out pretty hardcore. A lot
Hmm.
of games got rid of those, and then we went to season passes. And I think a lot of people, season passes will always have a place, but I think a lot of people are really tired of everything having a
Of it
season
being
pass.
such a like
And
like no one wants that to be
yep,
the backbone of the progression.
I think the next gold rush is people trying to get in on this gotcha thing because um,
Yeah, probably.
I don't know. It's just it really does. It is predatory. It preys on your want of having a cool looking character or whatever, and then the gambling mechanic, and in a way that it's honestly like loot boxes on steroids. Because I always hated loot boxes because I didn't care about the things in them that much, and they were just an annoying block to progression. But when you add in like full characters and the way they look and the way they play, that
Yeah,
gets a lot harder to be like, oh, I don't care. That is the game at that point. So
totally.
like we talked about with that free to play Souls like game, hoping it's not a gotcha game. It's like, well, what can you do? What can you do? Because
I know.
I hate the model, I hate the system, and yet I play the games. I don't spend money on
I
them,
know, right?
but I
But you
don't know
still
that there's any.
participate in the corrupt system. No,
I
I,
know
I
I'm
get it.
still
I
a
get it.
wheel, a cog in the.
There's still a Yeah, I get it. The nice thing is, I don't believe that will fully replace like anything. It does seem like enough developers and enough players want contained experiences like an Elden Ring or something else where it's like you don't have to deal with that. So on the plus
Agreed.
side, I think we will continue to get enough games where it's not going to make life unbearable. But it is frustrating, and part of me always hopes for what is the next true World of Warcraft. I don't know that anything ever will be what that was to me then, to me
Yeah,
now,
I don't think
or
so either.
then.
Maybe
I
when
don't,
VR finally becomes
maybe.
like usable, there will be something compatible, but that's also terrifying to think about. Like
Right.
that could be a problem for society as we know it.
Oh,
All right, I
cool.
think
Wuthering
we
Waves.
wasted way too much time on Woo. Well, let's get to Shadow of the Erdtree. So
Oh, that
I
old thing?
shudder to think of how many hours into Shadow of the Erdtree I am, but it's dozens at this point. I'm
Yeah.
probably honestly, I don't know how far into it I am. I've got to be 50 or 60%, but I've heard there's 10 main bosses, and I think as far as like main path bosses, I've only fought 4. So maybe I've done more exploration than boss fights. I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. You're
Yeah.
still you kind of started it and then had to have a side journey.
Had to back out a little bit.
Sojourn.
Yeah. Ooh, good use of the word sojourn. That's a good word. I had to replay Elden Ring because I originally played it on my PC a couple years ago. And then my PC has been in a state of disrepair for like over a year. And it's water cooled. I'm fixing it is going to be a whole bear of a task. So I just didn't do it. So I was like, I'll just play it on PlayStation. I'm sure I could like, all I need to do is beat Radon, beat Moog, get to the DLC. What
You
I
should
didn't
just
really,
donate it to science.
I should donate my PC to science. Um, but I was thinking I'll just quickly get to the DLC and upgrade my weapons a little bit. But what I didn't factor in is that like some of the weapon upgrades you really have to get pretty far into the game to get like +8 whatever. And also like your talisman slots, like to have like a good build, like to get your 4th talisman slot, you have to beat Godfrey, which so you have to get like 60ish% of the way through the main game. Um, and then for the build I'm running, like some of the stuff I wanted is in Crumbling Farm Azula, which is later game. And I'm also going to try and get as much as I talk about platinums, I'm going to try and get the platinum for Elden Ring this time. So I was like, well, wait a minute. If I want to trigger the events to get to Crumbling Farm Azula, I have to like get some stuff before it changes like the world and I can't access certain things anymore. So now I'm doing that. Anyway, long story short, like my replay of Elden Ring, while it has been expedited from my original playthrough, I've probably put 50 to 60 hours into it since I restarted a couple of weeks ago. I did get to the DLC and I played 5 to 7 hours. I would say I beat the first I beat the first main story boss, and I'm
That's
on
true.
the
You beat
second.
the first two. Yeah.
The first. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, you didn't beat the second. I'm
no, I'm
sorry.
on the
Yeah.
second. Yeah. So I beat
Right.
the
Right.
first
Yeah.
main story boss. I beat one or two mini bosses in the world, and then I'm on the second main story boss, which is was proving to be a real challenge. And I was like, my damage output was just really poor, even with collecting Erdtree fragments. So I was like, I need to like get a couple more upgrades and like get my fourth talisman slot and stuff. So anyway, but I will say, like, before we get to the DLC, playing Elden Ring again has been a blast. Like, I think there are some flaws with the game, but it's a top 10 game for me, like the base game itself. And I just was pulled right back into it. Like, I love the skyboxes. I love the sound design, the music. The gameplay is such a blast. I'm doing a dex build instead of like a straight strength build like I did last time, which has been fun. And then getting into the DLC, like it's great. So I think we can go from there. Like I've played enough of it that I can talk a little bit about some of the things. Um, but I think that from what I've experienced so far, the DLC is shaping up to be even better than the base game, impressively so. And I imagine you agree with that statement.
Yeah. And I should have said this out at the outset. I didn't really give it any thought, but there won't be any spoilers really in this. If anyone's concerned about that, mainly because Zach hasn't done most of it.
Yeah, he
So
literally can't
hopefully
spoil it for
in
me.
August, about July, we will
Yeah.
dig into some spoilers
Well,
because
the
I'm sure
spoiler
there will
section.
be. I mean, heck, we're already a week into July here, so there's. I mean, half of July is going to be Elden Ring, probably for
Yep.
me still. So
I think all of it
um,
will be
we'll do a bit
for
now
me.
and a bit then. But yeah, so I'm one who was a little bit more critical of Elden Ring at release. Um, you know, I came obviously we came from different perspectives. This was your first FromSoft game. This
Right.
was my fifth
Mm-hmm.
or so. I mean, I've played everything basically except 1 and 2 because I'm hoping they'll like remake those, but maybe I'll give in one day and check those out. So yeah, I came from a completely different perspective, and Elden Ring brought some really amazing things to the table: the open world, the exploration, uh, horseback riding, combat, all of that. Very, it's just it was very incredible to be in the world and to like look off at these huge vistas, which maybe you've seen in something like Dark Souls 3 or whatever, but everything you can go to. Whereas in a Dark Souls 3, most things you can go to, but there still are a lot of like backdrops and just things that are meant to make the world feel full, even though it's a mostly linear type game. It was incredible to get that, and then also kind of get the best of both worlds in a sense, because you come across these legacy dungeons like um, why can I only think of
Stormvale,
Rhea Lucaria,
Rhea
Stormvale?
Lucaria,
Is
Stormvale.
that the name of the academy?
No,
Rhea
Stormvale's
Lucaria. I
the
don't know.
first
Anyways,
castle. It's Godric's castle.
Stormvale.
Yeah.
Exactly. Those types of things are very much like, okay, we've made this awesome open world, but here you are, no horse, classic FromSoft design.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna navigate your way through this labyrinth of a castle. So you kind of got the best of both worlds. Where I came down on Elden Ring for the most part was that there were some wasted. I felt, and this is a little bit. I don't know. This is how I feel. You feel a little bit differently. I do think there's a lot of interesting areas in the original game's map, and sometimes space is needed. You don't want everything to feel cramped and too busy, but I do feel there are too many locations in the base game that just felt kind of dreary and drab and not that interesting, and a little bit wasted. And then you combine that with the fact that a lot of the dungeons were reskins, a lot of the bosses were reskins, a lot of the
Yeah.
rewards were kind of un impressive. And when you would get to the end of something and you're like, well, I don't care about that, I didn't need that, whatever. And then on top of all this, my biggest complaint was the balancing felt really all over the place with some of these bosses. The most notable being Melania, and how incredibly overtuned that boss is. So much so that it's become legendary basically from all of their games. It's probably the hardest boss ever. And I would argue they went too far with that one, in my opinion. It was not fun to learn, and it felt like even with the ashes, the tears, or whatever they're called, that you can bring in a second thing to help you. and I don't know, whatever tricks you can have up your sleeve. It still felt overtuned a little bit. But anyways, all this just to give perspective. These are my thoughts on Elden Ring. Since coming back to it, Elden Ring was 2022. Is that right?
Yes, correct.
So we're 2 years. We're past 2 years from its release, which is crazy. So I will say, coming back to it, I have a bit of a fresh take on it because I no longer have the not met expectations of a Dark Souls 3, or mostly Dark Souls 3 is the reference I think of, because it's
Mm,
very different thematically from like a Bloodborne or a Sekiro.
yeah,
But I was able to come back to this game now after 2 years, knowing it's Elden Ring, knowing
yeah,
this is doing something different. I don't need to fight. I don't need to fight these bosses without a mimic or whatever if it's not fun. Like, they put these in the game. I'm going to use them. I'm going to enjoy the things that Elden Ring does best, which
yeah.
is exploration and
To an
just
extent, the
setting and
ridiculousness setting.
exploration.
Yeah, and kind of going wild with it. Like it's like, okay, I'm gonna have a duplicate of myself, and we're
Yeah,
gonna go wild
it's
on a
just a
boss.
it's
Like
just a
it's different. It's a different thing. It's not the
medieval fantasy. I'm going to run around as a knight and I'm going to destroy stuff. This isn't about me. I guess what I get hung up on is a lot of these older FromSoft games. They really are a lot about man versus man
mano a
challenge.
mano.
Like,
I know.
can I beat this thing in front of me? Do I have the willpower, the patience to beat this
Yeah,
thing? I don't feel that way as much about Elden Ring. I feel like it's more a fantasy. It is more just like,
yeah,
you are going to be this knight or whatever, and you have all these tools to become as overpowered as you'd like.
yeah.
Just explore this magical world and get lost in it. That's what I
And
feel
have
more
whatever
about Elden
wacky
Ring.
powers you want to get, and to some extent, you need them. Yeah, I agree. I think Dark Souls and even Bloodborne and some of those, it's very much you're going to learn the move set. You need to play the games on their own terms. And I think there's like a sliding scale of FromSoft games where it's like, Sekiro is on one side of you're going to play it one way. Dark Souls 3 is a little closer. There's a few different builds, but it's still like you're going to learn these bosses and you're going to do things kind of a certain way. Bloodborne's a little bit more loose. I think there's a lot more weapon types, but still it's kind of contained. Whereas you get to Elden Ring and there are so many different builds and so many different powers, and then you have all these different spirit ashes. You have mimic tier and all these crazy buffs and stuff you can do. And I think going in not think like it almost does a disservice to think of this as another Dark Souls because it's fundamentally kind
It
of
did.
different. Like
It did originally. Yeah.
there's and there's parts of this game where you can feel that like it's the same creators, but this is much like Sekiro. Like I heard a lot of people who bounced off Sekiro, and I went into it and loved it, but I knew how different it was going to be, and I went into it learning to play the game on its
But
own
the thing
terms,
is,
and
Elden Ring looks so the same as Dark
it
Souls
does.
3. And
They're
to an
both,
untrained
yeah,
eye, if you're not digging into the nuance, it is
yeah,
Dark Souls 3 open world. But you really get into
and
the nuance of
it
it.
was kind of
They're,
pitched
they're
that way
doing quite a few
almost.
things differently.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, for sure. Do we
Oh,
have lag?
sorry, you cut out for just, yeah, we had a
That's
little
okay.
bit of lag there. So, anyways, there's some
Hello.
perspective. And to give more perspectives, Sekiro is probably my favorite FromSoft game, where a lot of people don't like it because of how different it is. I love it because they it's so simple. They picked one thing, and they balanced the entire game around this one sword, this one gameplay style, and it feels balanced to perfection. And
Yeah,
that's why I love that. So obviously, coming to Elden Ring, that is the other end of the scale we're at right now, and I
totally.
struggled to enjoy it. And I still have critiques that I think are valid. But coming back to the DLC now, after my 10-minute preamble, I will say I am enjoying the game significantly more because I'm trying to focus on the things it does best, as we mentioned. But that aside, I think the DLC, which I even hate calling it a DLC, this is like a freaking full blown game. The only difference is you can't access it from the start.
Yeah,
This game is enormous. It cracks me up that he said this was the size of Limgrave.
I love it.
It's so funny. But the Shadow of the Erdtree, I think, is multiple times better than the base game, in my opinion. From level design to even boss fights. And at this point, I have fought 5 or 6 bosses, like actual bosses. And Not one of them. The first boss, I kind of was like trying to get a feel for, all right, where are we at? Are all of these going to be Millennia? Like, what are we doing here? I kind of want to go back and refight the first boss because I think I could probably beat it solo. Um, I ended up bringing in one of the story summons that are at the front gate, and I had fun with the fight. I beat it. I tried like 15 times on my own, and then I was like, all right, let's just bring in the story summon, and it
Yeah,
was
that's what I
thematically
did.
cool because
Yeah.
it's a character that you've talked to, and she said, hey, I'll help you out, whatever. And so it was cool to bring her in, and then first try I beat him. So it was fun, very cool fight visually. I will say all of the boss fights I've come across so far, I have enjoyed with probably in the same tier as any of my favorites from the base game. There haven't been any that have been really lackluster. Just visually, there's some visual standouts so far with the bosses. Just really
Hmm.
cool designs, concepts, arenas. So I've been having a blast on that front. It's almost felt a little more Dark Souls tuned, maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I haven't yet had to bring in, nothing's felt like Millennia so far. I haven't had to bring in any spirit ashes or anything like that.
I hear that
So I've
might
been having a,
change at the very, very end,
I
but
think it will because I've heard that things like, obviously there was all this discourse at the start that is Erdtree too hard. Like what did it have, a mixed review on Steam
yeah. Well,
because the DLC was too hard,
I think there was two parts to that. One is that people didn't realize that these Skagitry fragment or Shadow Tree what
which it tells
fragments.
you right at the beginning.
It does, but I think some people just didn't realize that was like necessary for like damage and whatever. That seems to be part of that discourse, but I think the other part of the discourse is I think one or two of the final. I think in particular the final. And I don't even know who it is, but there's a final boss that's supposedly ridiculously hard,
Yeah, and it
and
may be harder than Millennia, and we'll have that discussion when we
I
get
don't
there.
know.
But
I'm curious.
that is funny
What
though, because the fragments literally say, "Oh, these make you stronger in the shadow of the Erdtree,"
What are you
and
doing
people are like,
reading?
"I
Why are
didn't
you
know that.
reading
I didn't
things?
know those were necessary." Actually, to put some context, I am at a point, and I'm pretty high level. I have all of the stats that matter basically at their hard caps of 80 for my build. So I mean, I could go to 99, but you get diminishing turn returns like massively after 80.
Yeah,
So I'm about as powerful as you can be or need to be for anything. I actually have stopped cashing in my fragments for now because the last boss I fought was
your
really cool.
fragments
I
or
really
your
enjoyed it.
runes.
My fragments.
Okay.
I can probably
Your
get
shadow
one or
tree
two more.
fragments. Okay,
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it to
This,
like
what are
limit
they?
yourself getting
Scadu
too
tree.
powerful?
Yeah, the
I'm
last
not even
boss I
sure, but yeah,
fought
yeah.
the last boss I fought was really, really cool, but I beat him. I mean, I felt like I could have beat him first try. I didn't. I beat him in like 5 tries, and that
Hmm.
to me is a little bit. That's a little too quick. I like a boss to take me 10 to 15 tries. There's one boss that I've fought up to this point, one of the main bosses, and he took me probably 30 tries, probably 2 hours. I
Yeah,
don't know if that math adds up, but like he
something
was
like
one
that.
of those fights. And by the time I got to the end of it, I knew this dance in and out,
Hmm.
and just it was perfection. I decimated him on the run that I beat him.
Yeah,
And it was one of those like, oh, that's that Dark Souls 3
that's the
feeling of
feeling.
like I fought this boss one on one. I learned him perfectly, and I made him pay every time I could.
Yeah,
So
I do miss that a little bit because I think about Dark Souls 3, like some of those fights, Nameless King, Storm King, whatever, Sister Frida, Slave Knight Gale, like those are three of the best boss fights I've ever done. And I probably spent like 10 plus hours on each of
hours.
those because
Yeah.
I'm terrible at these. But like, it's the same thing as like you learn every move, every phase, and you get to the point where you can almost do it with your eyes closed. And it's a dance. And then when you finally beat it, there's this rush of adrenaline that is unmatched
Yeah,
in
there's nothing
anything.
like
And
it.
I've gotten that a couple of times from Elden Ring, but I will say I don't get it as much. And so what Elden Ring excels at is like the exploration and getting lost in the world in some ways is more like kind of a Breath of the Wild. Like I just have more fun gallivanting about, but I do miss like that, one-on-one, you learn the dance and you will if you stick with it, you'll learn it and you'll get it. So I'm excited to see more of that. And I kind of wonder myself if like, uh, if I need to do all the Shadow Tree fragments or whatever. But yeah,
Oh, you will. Oh, you will. I have a lot at this point. Um, and
what's your
maybe
Shadow Tree like level? Because it'll tell you your level. Because I think I'm at
I'd
three.
have to look. I think it's 8.
Okay.
I'd
Yeah.
have to check. I can't remember because there's two. Obviously, there's one for like your horse and
Right.
your
Yeah.
spirit ashes, which I don't even. I mean, I guess it is nice to have the horse health. Anyways, point being, I have really enjoyed the bosses so far.
Yeah.
The one I'm speaking of that was pretty difficult, I would honestly put up. It's my favorite boss of any boss I fought in Elden Ring, including the base game. And it's
Nice.
up there with some of the best boss fights in Dark Souls 3, in my opinion. I think it was very
Awesome.
well balanced, and I think it's what FromSoft needs to look at. And hopefully I don't know, we'll see, because neither of us have gotten to the end where we hear things get crazy. But like this boss felt so well tuned in that he was aggressive. He had very complex move sets that were difficult to learn or dodge or whatever, but he wasn't relentless. He had things you could punish. I think that is the main key of what bothered me about a lot of Elden Ring bosses is that there was no punish window. It's like they could do all of their moves back to back at a
Yeah.
million% speed, and it's like, okay, well, when am I supposed to punish him for
Well, don't they
doing
all?
that? Or like,
Don't some of the Elden
so
Ring
this
bosses
boss, just real
also?
quick before you
Yeah.
just
No. Go ahead.
this boss, he was well designed in that way. There were punishable moments where you could dodge or get out of the way of something, and then he would have a second where you could punish him for it, and it just felt
Mm-hmm.
it was visually amazing too. Second phase was really cool. Great boss fight. Go ahead.
Awesome. I was just gonna say, doesn't Elden Ring have this thing where it's like bosses will trigger certain move sets based on input on your controller? So like when
Yeah,
you go to, if
they
you
got
try and heal
aggressive with that.
or do something, it's
Yep.
like that triggers different. And I remember that from, I think it's Margit, like one of the first bosses, where if you're at a distance and he's like waiting, you go to heal, he'll throw knives at you or whatever. It's like, and to
Yeah,
some extent that can be really interesting, but I
I
think
agree to some
it
extent.
does feel like Elden Ring, they've been tinkering with that, plus like different, like I think they've got taken a different approach where it's like you're not just going to dodge and wait for these windows. We want you to toy with buffs and abilities and do some very different things to, to get around these things, which is kind of a different feeling experience. And I think at times that's really cool and interesting, but at times especially if you don't have the right build, it's like, well, I don't want to go respec just to do this boss. um
Yeah, which I had
so
to do for Millennia,
yeah,
because like
I had to do that
again,
for
some of
Millennia
these
too.
bosses in the base game, if you're a strength build, that's what I
Yeah.
think a lot of people do
I
and
had to
go
go
straight for a
do
big heavy
Rivers of
sword.
Blood. Yeah, I had to go do Rivers of
These
Blood for
bosses
Millennia.
were so fast. Millennia does not stop, is not punishable, and then also heals the entire time. And so it's like, okay, I have this giant slow weapon that the point of it is supposed to be if I dodge well enough, as soon as there's a punish window, I can do a ton of damage. Well, if there's no punish window, I have to change my build. That doesn't feel good. Anyways,
Yeah,
not to rant too much. I do think that the balance so far has been really good. I've been enjoying
cool.
it. Um, and then to speak to the level design, man, it's just we've talked about this a little bit. For me, Elden Ring, the base game, wasn't in my top 10 games of all time. It just wasn't, didn't make the cut. It
Mm-hmm.
fell short in some key ways for me. I think the DLC on its own, like separated from the game, I think it might be a top 5 game for me.
Awesome.
Like
I love that.
all time. We're talking all time, which is at this point getting to be a very tough list to crack. We'll
And
see.
in like 50% from soft.
It literally is. I mean, we got
It is
Sekiro in
for
there, we
me.
got Dark Souls 3.
It is
Yeah.
for me too. Yeah.
And then, you add in, I got to figure out where Liza P is at, which is another Souls like game. Like running out of room here. But point is, this is just, I think it's so much better. I think that they have, um, obviously Elden Ring was their first real look into an open world. And I think they did a pretty great job, honestly, because open worlds can
Yeah.
be really hard if you're a team that does mostly linear type stuff. And if anyone could do it, I would think it would be FromSoft because their level design is so impeccable. But at the same time, that could have easily, and I think did to an extent, that could easily be lost when you go to an open world. You could lose
Yeah.
some of that magic from how good you are at designing these linear looping levels. And I feel like they just, I don't know how, but they leveled up several times from the base game to the DLC. And I'm very curious to see if they can level up further in the next one with if they continue with this open world. But just
I think they
the
can.
the map the map size itself, if you look at the map on paper, sure, it might be the size of Limgrave, but this will take you 10 times longer than it did to explore Limgrave, because and you can't see it on the map, but
Mm-hmm.
there are layers and layers up and down and things that, this cave that wraps around underneath the mountain into a passage to another area underneath. Like, you can't even see where you're at on the map because it's showing the top portion. You're at an
Yeah.
entire area underneath that. Like, I don't know why they didn't create a map that had layers once you discovered it, but it could be argued that adds more to like the classic FromSoft, where there were never maps in the other games to begin with. You really had to learn the layouts and learn your way around. I think
Mm-hmm.
this is maybe a compromise for that. But this game is so dense. I mean, you just, if you want to find the secrets in this DLC, you will probably spend, I think people have said 50, 60 hours. Yeah. I mean, I think for me,
Yeah.
that's conservative. I'm going to be well over that because I take my time and I really thoroughly explore. I think it's very easy to spend 100 hours in this DLC, which is just
It's
like,
crazy.
when can that be said of anything? Honestly, I kind of wish that this were the size of Elden Ring. I kind of
Yeah.
wish if they were to make an Elden Ring 2, I would want it to be this size. Maybe make them a little quicker and make them this size. Because,
I feel
it's
like with
plenty.
I feel like with
60 to
Elden
100
Ring,
hours is plenty.
it is.
180 is overkill.
I feel like they kind of fell into the open world trap of they wanted it to be impressive in its size and scope and magnitude, which I totally understand. And you could feel that because the later game portion of the base Elden Ring game feels really stretched thin, like the whole northern area, western or northeastern area, um, like the mountains and whatever. I remember that portion of the map filled out so quickly, and there was a lot of running, and there was some stuff there, but it felt like they got stretched thin and ran out of time and didn't fill it as well. And
Yeah. Yeah.
whereas like Liurnia and Limgrave, some of those places felt a lot more dense, and then of course there was like the Nulkron, like the underground areas, and so it feels like they've learned that lesson a little bit, because even though the DLC technically is less space, like in
Yeah.
those dimensions, I've noticed that in the 5 to 7 hours I've played, is like I'd be like, okay, I'm in the opening part of the map, I can see the other end of it, I'm gonna go there, and then you're like, oh, there's a chasm, I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go this way. And then you find a cave, and the cave wraps around, and you're like, okay, I'm
100%.
I'm behind the mountain.
100%.
Okay. And then you come up on top of where you started, and you're like, oh, I know where I am. And it feels like such a good compromise of, I still feel like I'm in an open world. I know I can get to these places, but I can't just run. Unlike Breath of the Wild, I can't just run and climb up them, which is cool. It's like I have to do the Dark Souls
How do
3
I
or
get there?
Bloodborne. Yeah, what doors do I need to unlock?
And
What
how do I
passages?
remember? Get, 10
Yeah,
hours
that too.
later,
Yeah,
oh, I need to figure out how to get there. Or you show up there and you're like, oh, this is how, it's very much their
yeah,
classic level design on an open world level. And it's pretty insane to feel like they learned that lesson in the span of the game to the DLC. I mean, most companies can't learn a lesson between sequels. Like,
or at all. Yeah,
it's just, or at all. It's just incredibly impressive. And
I
you
agree.
kind of hit the nail on the head there when you're talking about the base game. I guess that's the best way to define my issue with the open world in the base game, is that you look at the map and you'd be like, okay, I can see there's this little section over here. I need to mark that off, see if there's anything over there. You'll go over there, follow along the mountain, and oh, it just turns out no, there's not really anything over here. Maybe there's one little thing on the ground that's like a rune or something. Not really, cross it off, and that happens quite a bit. Or it'd be like, okay, there's a dungeon here, you go in, oh, it's another one of these, it's kind of a reskin dungeon. Those are kind of one of the two things that will more often than not be the case. Sometimes there's
Hmm.
something really cool. There's a lot of paths that you're like, all right, let me check, oh, cross off, now there's nothing over there.
True.
In
Yeah.
this DLC, that quite literally does not exist. I swear, you'll look at your map, a little tiny section of the map, and there'll be like three little branches that look like they kind of dead end. And you'd be like, all right, let me check these off one by one. Let's go this one first. You'll head down there. Oh, there's like a little hole in the ground. Okay, let me see where this goes. 3 hours later, you will be somewhere completely different, somewhere you didn't know existed. Three sites of grace later, and you still won't have explored those other two. And then when you get back to those other two, one will be a dungeon, and one will do the exact same thing where it goes way up high and loops around to an area you didn't know existed. Like, just every square millimeter of this map connects to somewhere you didn't even know existed. It's insane what they've done. I mean,
It's
even
awesome.
there's even dungeons that you get to the end, and the base game, you finish a dungeon, you warp out basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'll finish a dungeon and there's a warp sign and you're like, wait, is that a door in the back? Go open the door, entirely new area at the end of the, and you're just like, what in the world? I thought this, in your brain, you're like, all right, let me do this dungeon. This is a nice little breakup from the open world. I'll do this and get back to what I was doing. And then lo and behold, you've discovered an entire new area and you're like, well,
Mm-hmm.
I can't count how many times I've had to put a pin on the map because I'm like, I'm not ready to, I need to finish this thread from before I start this new thread and I've got 8 threads open. It's
Yeah.
just, it's honestly, for someone, I've gotten really good at mapping things in my mind in these games and like, making sure I've kept track of which ways I've turned right and left and crossing everything off. This has really tested that. It is it is that hard to like keep track of where you have and have not been and what loose ends you haven't finished. It's just never ending and in the best way possible. I mean,
Yeah.
I've probably done about 50%, maybe 60% of the map and there's still so much more to explore, probably areas I don't even know exist, I'm sure. So
Love it.
having a blast. I'm just glad to report it's been amazing. Part of that is my perspective shifting a little bit, which is always, I mean, perspective is the lens through which we see everything, but I think a hefty portion of it has been a glow up. Like this really is an upgrade from the base game in just about every way, I would say.
Yeah. That's awesome. And I mean, this is how I felt with like I love Bloodborne, but Bloodborne was lacking in a few ways. Mainly, like the bosses were not as difficult for the most part, and then the DLC really solved that problem. And I feel like Elden Ring they kind of did the same thing where they took the downsides, the complaints, and they seem to be solving them with the DLC pretty well. Um, so I'm excited to play more of it. And oh man, I felt pretty confident that Final Fantasy VII Rebirth was going to be like my personal game of the year. But if Erdtree continues the way it's been feeling, like I could, that might be taking the game of the year for me. We'll see.
Yeah. Honestly, at the Game Awards, I will be shocked if anything beats Erdtree. I mean, it's the highest reviewed game of the year.
Can a DLC be like eligible for
I mean,
game of the year?
I think the Cyberpunk DLC was
Did
eligible.
it? Okay. Yeah, I can't remember if that was a separate
It won some
category or
awards.
yeah.
It
I
won
agree
like,
though. Like if it's eligible, I think it would be hard. They would be hard
which is
pressed to
crazy.
be.
I honestly, I wouldn't have going into it. I would have said, "Nah, DLC can't win it." But
Mhm.
like I've said, this is bigger than most games. It
Yeah.
should be its own game. I wish they would make a standalone version almost because I feel like it's as much as it like adds to the scope of the entire game. I also think it would be really good standalone for people who like. I mean, look at what you're talking about. The amount of investment that's
Yeah.
required to get to the DLC is quite a bit. It
Hmm.
would be really cool to just boot it up and be able to play it from square one. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. That is what it is. You know what I just thought about, and I always thought this is funny because your PC is broken and you have to do all this work to get to the DLC. Blah blah blah. If you were on PC, you could just download a save of a character that's ready to
True.
go.
Yeah.
But then I thought, I bet you there's a PlayStation save somewhere out there if you looked at it that you could like put on a thumb drive. It's too late for that. You're in too deep, but should have
I
told you
know.
that
Yeah.
40 hours
Well,
ago.
I decided I
I bet
wanted
that
to
exists.
get the platinum and, whatever else. Also, I loved Elden Ring enough that I did want to replay it at some point. So it's fine, but I bet that does exist. I
Well,
hear your point though.
you need to get to Liza P though next. Put that on your list because the fact
We'll
that you
see.
finished Stellar Blade and not Liza P is
I
criminal.
know a lot of that's just timing though. You know how it goes.
Yeah, yeah.
Timing of where things are at. But I will do Liza P at some point. I could feel the quality from that game. Although I think I'm going to restart it when I play it, just because it's been long enough that I'm like, I don't
Oh,
even.
it's so good.
Yeah,
It's so stinking good. All right. Is there anything else to mention about Elden Ring?
I don't think so. It's awesome.
Sorry, Shadow of the Erdtree.
Right.
We must
Now
distinguish
lump them all
between the two.
together.
No, I refuse to. Yeah, we'll talk more about it in August, about July, I'm sure, because I still have dozens of hours ahead of me, and you have most of the DLC to go. So I hope that in August we can discuss at length our thoughts on the DLC final boss. Might be a stretch, but that's kind of the plan.
Yeah. Awesome. Well,
Okay,
let's hear some of the demos and maybe give the
yeah,
highlights of
let's get to.
what
I'll
you
try and
liked.
do this quick because I thought there's no way we take an hour, and then we always take an hour. So
Always.
I know, talking about 2.5 games. Steam Next Fest, We were going to do a full video breakdown on this, but just life's too busy, and Zach didn't get to some games, and we're way behind on it now. So I just wanted to call out some games because honestly, this is what some of
Mm-hmm.
what I played when I looked back at my month of June. I was like, man, I only played 2 games. Well, it's kind of because I spent probably 3 or 4 days sampling a bunch of these here. So no specific order, and maybe I'll get some video clips to send to you to add to this or whatever, so that it can be a little bit more, you can actually see what's happening. But one of the ones I played is called Akimbot, Akimbot. I think it's coming out. I'm not going to check on all these, but I think it's coming out in August this summer. And this caught my eye because it is very much a Ratchet and Clank inspired game. And you can tell immediately when you look at it. It is,
Wow, yeah, it really is.
yeah, it's Ratchet and Clank through and through.
Love it. Yeah, that's cool.
Kind of really goes. It's very reminiscent of the earlier games, more like the PS2 games, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And it did leave me. It was a little bit lacking in the. I don't know. I'm not sold. I'm not 100% sold on this being worthwhile, but it is bombastic and fun enough. And I just don't think we get enough. I don't know why we don't get enough of these like PlayStation
Yeah,
2 platformer games like this, shooter
I want
platformers
more of
like
them.
Ratchet and
Yeah,
Clank. Like indie developers, I feel like we need more of these. So when I saw
yeah,
this, I was like, heck yeah, we need more of this. I want to check this out when it comes out. At least look for reviews. Um, the little robot guy is a little bit annoying at the start. Hopefully that's can be tuned down, or is not as bad as for the full game. But yeah, Ratchet and Clank vibes for sure, which I feel like we need more of in the AA indie space.
yeah.
I played second one was Bow Path of the Teal Lotus, and this one actually comes out I think in like a week. It comes out 17th of July maybe. I'll have to double check on that, but this is a
18th, but yeah.
the 18th. Okay, this is a Metroidvania. It's very much following the Hollow Knight uh, inspiration, as most are these days.
Oh, this one's on
But
my
this one is more of
radar. Yeah.
a what I always get this. I confuse these unfortunately, but this is looking more Chinese than Japanese, right? Or is this Japanese?
Perhaps.
Tea
Yeah, I
is
don't know.
Chinese. I don't know. One of the things you get in the like your main health is tea. You drink tea or whatever.
Right.
It feels more Chinese to me. I could be wrong. I could be way off
Yeah.
base, but uh, so you're like a little fox guy, and the demo was about maybe between an hour and a half, and the art style is very pleasant. It's Hollow Knight esque, but has its own flavor. The color palette is very vibrant. I really like the blues, a lot of the blues with
Mm-hmm.
some contrasting colors. And gameplay wise, it was very tight. Like controlling the character was very tight. The upgrades you got by the end of the demo, very enjoyable to use in this world. Uh, the movement, the tech was very felt like there could be a skill ceiling, challenging, fun to master. And by the time I finished the demo, it was one of the demos where I got to the end and I was like, oh shoot, I just wanted to keep going.
Yeah.
So this is one of the
That's good.
Metroidvanias I'm really looking forward to.
Awesome.
Next, I
That looks
played
cool.
Caravan Sandwich, which this one
Not
I'm
sandwich, sandwich.
Sandwich. I don't know why it's called that. I guess we'll find out. This one, the first thing I'll say about this, the art style is so captivating to me. I love art styles like this that are kind of very stylized, but almost have this clay-like nature to them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's the best way to describe this, but the art style really pops for me. And it ran very well on Steam Deck and on PC. You get to drive around in this caravan, this like buggy, and it's really responsive to drive around in. The question I have about this game, it kind of feels like you're wandering around, maybe doing side quests for people, solving some like puzzles, but it did give me hints of like maybe we need a name for this to more quickly convey it. But I get this feeling in some games that kind of reminds me it's a video game and it feels empty and kind of quiet in an eerie
Mm-hmm.
way that is off putting to me. Don't know how to succinctly describe that, but
Gotcha.
despite there being NPCs or whatever, it just kind of has this lifeless quality to it where it kind of
Kind of an
feels
uncanny
void of
valley,
something.
like almost a
Yeah, maybe.
liminal.
There was a tinge of that in this where I was like, okay, hopefully, but by the end of the demo too, you kind of get set off into the greater open world, and I was very intrigued to explore in this dune buggy. It's a really cool, not dune buggy, but buggy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Cool premise. I'm very curious to see where that one lands. I think that's most of these are coming out in the summer. I think I'll have to double check. Next one I checked out was Crashlands 2. This is a very niche title. I don't think a lot of people know about, but I played Crashlands, the original game. It's an iOS phone game that's also on PC, and it's like you can point to click and move your character around and do combat and stuff. It was very zany art style, very much a phone game, but also really fun. Probably one of the only games, other than these gacha games we've talked about, that is a phone game that I've played. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I saw this, I was like, "Oh heck yeah, let's check this out." And it's first of all, the visual upgrade is this game actually looks really cool. The art style is maintained, but it looks a lot more crisp and detailed, and just a lot of fun. It's basically, if I had to describe this, it's basically a survival type game where you start out with nothing and you go out and you harvest stuff and you kill creatures to create better weapons and tools and make a base, and you can get pets and things like that. It's a
Mm-hmm.
survival game at its heart, kind of a sci-fi fantasy thing. So I put that on your radar, everybody out there. Like Crashlands was
That's
actually
cool.
pretty good, and I'm excited to jump into Crashlands too.
Nice.
Next one, Creatures of Ava. This is what is this? This is a basically a creature taming game. Um, man, I'm struggling to think of what to compare this to. Basically, you're going to run around in a very this is also a very stylized looking world, very colorful, and you're going to run around and you're going to learn how to tame certain creatures by like studying them and taking pictures. It's kind of more like that. And instead of harnessing them in a ball to torture them and make them fight for you, you instead are going to treat them lovingly and and then like be able to communicate with them so that they can unlock Metroidvania like blocks in the world. Basically,
Okay, that's kind of cool.
um, it's an open world game. I came away from the demo enjoying it. It gave me some. It was reminiscent a little bit of um, oh man, what was that Pixar looking Kana?
Kana, Bridge of Souls,
Parts of it,
Bridge of
parts of
Spirits.
controlling the character and her combat and like um using energy to cleanse the planet. It was like Kana mixed with um oh
Neopets.
shoot. Neopets mixed with what's the Xbox game where you're cleaning the gunk. The gunk. It was like the gunk Kana Neopets. There you go.
Okay,
That's Creatures of
interesting.
Ava. It was fun. I enjoyed it. I actually am curious
That
about
sounds cool. I love
that one
creatures,
as
so
well.
yeah.
Yeah. Dungeons of Hinterberg is one that
Oh
we've
yeah,
seen a few times. Very crazy looking art style. Almost, I mean, would you say comic book? I don't really know what to call that art
yeah.
style, to be honest.
Slightly comic book. Um,
Yeah, it's
I'm sure there's a real term for it, but yeah, comic
it's
kind of
really
has a
weird.
comic book quality to it.
This one didn't stand out to me at all every time we've seen it, but I was like, hey, let me check out the demo. And this one is kind of aiming to be. It feels like a persona type thing where like you wander around the town, you can meet people, develop relationships, but then you go into the dungeons of Hinterberg and like fight creatures and get loot. It's one of those
Okay.
third
Yeah.
person action game. The one thing I will say about this is that when I got into it, the art style appealed to me more than it did on a video. And secondly, the movement in this game is actually really cool. There's like I'm struggling to remember exactly, but there's something like basically snowboarding. You can snowboard around it
Nice.
at
Love
will,
it.
and
Yeah.
it's very fast, responsive. There's like little puzzles where you have to navigate and snowboard really quickly. You can grind rails on your snowboard and jump around. All of that is really cool and kind of a little bit sold me on this game. We'll
Yeah.
see if it's something that actually wins me over, but the movement was something where I was like, okay, I might actually be interested in this game.
Sweet. Glad to hear that. Like I love a
Yeah,
good like snowboard or, rail grinding or anything like that where it's
yeah,
thrown a
totally.
little bit of 90s
It's an
X
easy win.
games like type stuff into a fantasy sci-fi setting. I love it.
You get some fun, fast, responsive movement in a game, and it
It's good.
automatically
Yeah.
bumps it up. So sorry, I'm trying to blitz through these here. The two Souls-like games I played were Enotria and Flintlock. Enotria, the last song, there's been a lot of critical thoughts on this game. It's very double A. I think people are being a little too overcritical on it because I think we've gotten such good Souls likes in recent years
Yeah.
that we've forgotten, you know, that most
It's
of them are kind of rough around the
kind of an
edges.
unfair comparison, almost.
A little bit, yeah. I mean, Liza P really knocked the socks off everybody.
Yeah.
This is very much figuring to be a double A Souls game. Like it's going to be rough around the edges, and I don't know if it'll land for me. But I actually did. I went into it knowing everyone was pretty negative on it. Immediately bounced off. Came back, gave it another solid try, and the setting is really cool. It's Italian inspired. Basically, it's an Italian folklore story, and you're like a puppet.
Mm-hmm.
Not too dissimilar from Pinocchio or whatever, but like,
Yeah.
the city that I was exploring near the end is very much like an Italian city, and it's just kind of a new look. Visually, not the most
Yeah.
stunning game, but artistically with its visuals, actually pretty cool to look at. I took some screenshots and some video. I will
Cool.
keep my eyes on that one because I'm not one to snub a double A Souls game. If it's
Mm-hmm.
if it's doing enough things right. Flintlock Siege of Dawn, one I've had my eyes on for a long time. Now, this one I have mixed feelings on because I really, really liked Ashen, which is the first game, or maybe not the first game, but the game before this that these
Yeah.
developers made. Ashen is another Souls like, very stylized and really clay like in its art style, which is kind of where I get that original thought of it. Everything kind of looks like clay. And I just thought it was visually distinct, awesome to look at, and did a really good job of creating a Souls like game to explore. I loved that game. This to me feels a little more generic looking, to be honest. Flintlock Siege of Dawn. But after playing the demo, I am I'm very interested. I think it's going to be an 8 out of 10 probably, but it has some interesting movement tech, which is fun. The character's very mobile, which is again very different from most Souls games. You can double jump around. You have
Mm-hmm.
your little fox companion, which can like teleport you to. It's very Metroidvania in that like you can teleport to these little things of void or
Like
light, and then like get
waypoints or
around the
whatever.
map
Yeah.
quicker or whatever. And I found the combat pretty solid. I was engaged with the combat. I believe, I'm trying to remember. I think you can parry, and you've obviously got, it's more of a dual wield. I don't know if there's going to be different weapons, but you've also got your pistol and different guns you can use. It's doing some different things that may or may not land, but at the very least it was interesting and I enjoyed my time with it, and am looking forward to continuing on that one. That one comes out, it's either this month or August. So
Cool. Yeah, that one's on my list as well. I'm intrigued by it.
yeah, it's on a lot of people's. I'm bummed we're not getting an Ashen 2, but is what it is.
This month looks like it comes out in 10 days from this
Oh, so
recording.
that one in
July
Bow
18th.
Path of the Teal Lotus are real cool. That's why I was saying like the summer is
Yeah.
just full of these little games that I'm really
Yeah.
interested in, and it's just like where's the time? Okay, we're getting toward the end here. I promise everybody. Another one I played is called Self Loss, and this one is very much a Zelda like an old school top down Zelda like game, stylized art style. Kind of reminds me a little bit of another game called Below that maybe not a lot of people know of, but just kind of has that camera angle and art style.
Kind of
And this
reminds
one
me of
was really,
what was that? The Death's Door a little bit.
yeah, a little bit of that art style maybe too. Maybe also in like feel or theming a bit
Yeah.
too. And this one was fun. I'm unsure on this one, but it was doing its Zelda thing very well. Like you're running around, you're exploring. There's some decent combat, some decent puzzles, and I don't know. It was all kind of working. It was doing what it wanted to do well. Whether or not it's distinct enough to like put the time in and beat it, we'll see how the reviews are when it comes out. But I enjoyed my time with this one as well.
Nice. That looks
Quick,
interesting.
yeah, quickly here. I checked out Slider, which I think I heard about a long time ago. But this is an interesting concept where they've basically built a world out of like squares, and you can like shuffle the squares around. Like think of those mosaic puzzles where you have to get
Mm-hmm.
like a, you know, make a picture out of a mosaic by sliding the squares around. It's
Yeah.
basically a game designed around that concept where you can move squares around and then like physically move your, it's a top down 2D type game. And once you move the squares into place, you know, if this is the square my character's on and I move this square from up here and there's like a wall here, but I move it down here and there's a path, now I can walk over. And basically the game is built around puzzles and like even quests for NPCs where it's like this NPC over here, you talk to them and they want something and then you find it over here and then you can move the panels next to each other and it completes the quest. It's a very interesting concept that, you know, again, could land or could not, but it was very interesting and it feels kind of fresh and new. Like I don't think we've seen
Nice. Yeah.
anything like that that I can think of. I think we're getting to the end here. Let's see. I checked out a few others that maybe aren't worth discussing. You know, it's interesting. I checked out Arranger, which I don't know if you've heard about that,
Yeah,
but
we
that's
talked
kind of
about it
another.
in the like demo day, or like with all the showcases.
Oh, the showcases. So
Yeah.
yeah, this one's been getting quite a bit of buzz and people really like it. I did not. It didn't click with me in the demo.
Interesting. That's one you
So
were excited about, from what I remember.
yeah, and I really thought it would have. It's really hard to explain. We tried in the other episode, but you're moving squares basically, and everything along a column or row will move with you. And the
Mm-hmm.
puzzles are designed around that. And I think it could get really interesting. I just kind of, to be honest, was bored, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. So not something I can entirely put my finger on, but I figured I would just mention that I did play that and kind of was I didn't come away like craving to play more. So there were a
Yeah.
ton, man. There were so many. There were just and like you know, I think about this when we talk about gotcha infiltrating all of our other genres. There will always be at this point because the barrier to making a game has been decreased so much. There will always be good games coming out now, whether
Yep.
it's from one person or a team of 5 or a team of 50. There will be teams out there continually making unique, interesting, risky ideas that aren't, you know, the path of least resistance to billions of dollars, because at the end of the day this is an art form and there are people who care about it as an art form enough that we will never run out of games. So
Yeah.
Steam Next Fest is always an example of that. This year I feel like was even better than years past, or I just there were a lot of good demos out there. Shame you didn't get to try any of them, but a lot of them are coming out
I
this year,
know.
this summer.
Definitely
So
going to try some of these, for sure. So I'm glad you got to try a few and like give a few recommendations, and we'll have to see how the scores are once they come out. But
I know
a lot of cool
none I
stuff.
was willing to pick up because you know those are always risky with the smaller
Totally.
titles. But
Yeah.
this month for sure, Flintlock, Siege of Dawn, and Bow Path of the Teal Lotus. I'm
Mm-hmm.
very curious to see how those review and hopefully get into those at some point. Man, good.
Yeah.
The list is baffling at this point, but
Mm-hmm.
still be playing Erdtree in
I know.
September
I'll be
probably.
playing that, yeah, for the next couple months.
Oh man. All right. Well, any closing thoughts here? I feel like I've been talking for
Yeah, it's because you tried all the game. Like I didn't get around
oh
to
my
any of them.
gosh.
Um, no, closing thoughts are I got it. I better get back to Elden Ring if I'm gonna
Better get back to Elden. Did any of those
got
did one or two of
responsibilities.
those stand out to you or the demos as you look through them?
A few did. Bow and the Teal Lotus looks interesting. Flintlock has been on my radar for a bit. Hinter Dungeons of Hinterberg looks cool. Caravan Sandwich looks cool. Um, a Ranger looked interesting, although it's a bummer to hear that maybe didn't click. And then yeah,
It
there's
could
one or
just
two
be
others you
me though.
mentioned that I'm now
Could really
forgetting,
be
but
me.
yeah, there's quite a few that all look very interesting to me. So I'll probably pick up at least one or two of those over the next month or two. And I have a work trip coming up, so maybe I'll pick one of them up. Like maybe I'll pick up
On the Steam Deck.
Teal Lotus on my Steam Deck and take it with me or something. So
Yeah, it's a great Steam Deck game.
yeah,
Well, hopefully, maybe some of you out there found something from this rambling of mine. But if not, let me know if there was one that you liked from Steam Next Fest or just anything coming out. Honestly, this summer that's maybe a little under the radar. And I guess that's everything. That right there. Will wrap up July about June. We'll be back, of course, in August about July. probably right on time as we always are, like this one.
Time is a construct, so
yeah,
we're good.
We made time up anyways.
Yeah.
We made measurements of it up. So, oh, anyways, thank you. Yeah, that'll conclude this episode. Thank you for joining us, and we will catch you in a month.